Hey there, gang. Just a quick little missive here. I'm trying to still recover from this surgery. The neck's fine. I mean, I have a little discomfort, but the biggest problem is I had planned on doing a bunch of videos. I want to do some stuff on the Meris LVX because I've come up with some really cool presets and some things that people have been looking for out of it, such as making the hologram microcosm out of it and the Chase Bliss Thermae and some other cool stuff, which I have done, and I'm going to demonstrate for you. The issue is that my shoulders are so messed up from this operation. They're getting better every day, but they're so messed up that when I sit down to play guitar, after like a little while, they hurt like hell, and it kind of aggravates the ligaments and the tendons, which seems to be the issue. So I'll be getting to those soon. I also got some amazing presets I've discovered and created for the Eventide H90, and I think I should be able to do the shallow water preset and Thermae preset for the Zoom MS50G, because those might be pretty simple and you might really dig those. And it's super cheap, so if you can get those sounds out of that device, great, right? But today I want to just briefly talk about my frustration, and I think I finally reached my breaking point after 30 years with Pro Tools. Why? Well, I had a discussion with a plugin designer, one of the ones that I think to be probably one of the more elite, high-end plugin designers. And, I was having an issue, and he was like, oh, AAX. And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, AAX is a pain in the ass, which is the platform that Pro Tools uses rather than VST. He basically briefly told me it's just really difficult to program for, and Pro Tools is changing all the time, and I'm on Windows, and then Windows tends to do updates without telling developers about it, and they seem to be coordinating with Pro Tools sometimes, or better than they used to, but they're certainly not getting programmers involved as much as they should. And so it's just like one hand isn't talking to the other, and AAX becomes a problem and it crashes Pro Tools. Now, this used to happen far, far more, but lately, ever since I updated to the new Pro Tools 2023.6, anything that isn't like Oxford FabFilter Waves, the big dogs in the industry, it just craps out. I mean, it crashes, immediately reboots. And I was able to interface with some of these developers this time by giving them the logs, because their plugins have logs that I can zip and send to them, and they're like, yeah, there's a problem here. What I'm frustrated about is and I'm sure any of you would have the same frustration, you're in the middle of a project, you're in the middle of working, and boom, it's crashing and you can't get back in. And I've tried everything. What I basically came down to, and this is going to change my system of working henceforth, even if this got resolved, which I don't think it's going to, because I talked to a few other developers and they're like, yeah, well, we're not having that problem. And I'm like, well, are you on Windows 10 and 2023.6? Oh no, we're on Windows 11. And I'm like, oh geez, so if they're not working, if they're not addressing my issues on the same level, it's not going to get addressed. And one of these developers I know takes like a year to fix their plugins, which is why I stopped using them years ago. But I digress. So what my platform has become now, I've had to open up new sessions, import the audio from the other sessions, immediately consolidate all the files so they start and end at exactly the same spot, right? And then rename them as final or whatever each track is, and then start importing them over to Bitwig. Now, I've used Ableton in the past. I have nothing against Ableton. I just don't really care for it as much as Bitwig. One of the coolest things in Bitwig is you can modulate any parameter. Think about that. Let that sink in for a second, that any parameter can be modulated and multi-modulated like as many times as you want. It's pretty phenomenal. I don't like it for mixing, Pro Tools is still the best for mixing. It's probably also the best for just pure recording, but it's definitely by far the best platform for mixing. So this is very frustrating. So consolidated all my files, imported them into Bitwig. Now, one of the things you have to be very careful with Bitwig and Ableton is to make sure that the tempo of the song that you're importing is exactly what you're importing from. Like if you're at 120, you better set that sucker for 120 before you import it, because they do that time stretching thing. But here's another cool thing, and this was like totally an accident. Yes, they do the time stretching thing, but it's not always 1,000% accurate. It's pretty good. But for instance, this is actually cool. I'm not taking issue with this because I think it was funny and it worked out in an interesting way, is if I imported a stereo track and once you've, consolidated it, it's left and right. It would import the same left and right tracks that started and ended at the same point. It would time stretch one and the other one would stay the same, even if I set the tempo correctly. Now, you might go, oh man, that's so messed up. Yes, but I used it to my advantage and got creative with it, and it started creating new textures that weren't there before. So rather than fight it, I embraced it, and it was kind of cool. So what I ended up doing was importing those tracks, submixing in Bitwig, and using all those plugins that were crashing Pro Tools, because you get reports, you can tell which plugins they are. And some of them you're kind of shocked at what it is. Like they're not super tiny developers. But anyway, I would use those plugins, all the stuff I wanted to do in Bitwig, and then bounce out a submix to bring back into Pro Tools. So then I'm starting from just a 2-mix and then adding stuff from there. Is this an easy way to work? Hell no. And it's why I'm trying to learn more about Bitwig. Now, I've been messing with Bitwig for over a year, but at some point, I learned a lot about it and then got frustrated with it because it isn't as easy to mix as Pro Tools, and then left it alone, and now I'm trying to rediscover it. Fortunately, they have a really good Discord group, and you ask that Bitwig Discord group anything, and you've got an answer in like 2 minutes. Bless their hearts. Big thumbs up from me on that. So that helps. But back to Pro Tools, like, I've got 30 years invested. I was on Pro Tools when it was Sound Designer, when they were SD2 files, which you can't open anymore, but let's not go there because I'll just bang my head against the wall about that. What to do? A lot of my friends still work in Pro Tools, but a lot of my friends work in Cubase and Ableton and Logic and a whole bunch of stuff. I'm increasingly frustrated. I'd love to hear from you if you've ever had to run into this. What I'm about to do, because I was due for a new computer anyway, and I don't know that this is going to solve it just because the developers are developing for Windows 11 and don't have a 10 computer to test on, but I was due for a new computer. It's 5 or 6 years. Every 5 or 6 years, I got to get a new computer. But the one I use is super duper powerful. I mean, still by today's standards, even if I bought it 6 years ago, massively powerful. Yeah, I think it is 6 years old. I mean, you can move satellites with this one. I ordered a new one. There's the Pro Tools PC guys who I've relied on for many, many years to build my computers to my specs, to my particular desires, and that will be here in a couple of weeks with Windows 11 and everything I need already installed. But what I'm going to do with that computer is I'm only going to install for Pro Tools, just for AAX, just the most basic, reliable, standard big name companies, maybe Plugin Alliance, Waves, like I said, Oxford, FabFilter, just the big ones that I know I can rely on. And I don't even use Waves that much anymore because that's a whole nother video, but just the stuff that I know is not going to crash the system, and maybe continue working in this submix mode and going back and forth. I will record into Pro Tools. Absolutely, once I get these crashes resolved. But it begs the question, what the hell is Avid doing? Like, seriously, like, why aren't you giving developers, programmers a heads up. Why aren't you involving them in the process? As far as I know, I was talking to Bob Olson about this, they all use the same platform, which is called Juice, is the way, the software that they basically all design on. So why don't you bring them in and get their feedback and understand what their issues are and give them a chance to catch up before stuff starts crashing on everybody? Because honestly, this has been going on for 2 weeks. It's been very frustrating. I definitely lost a week going back and forth, trying to figure out what it was before I started doing this submixing technique. It's very frustrating. It's very, very frustrating, especially when you're paying for it. And oh, by the way, I reached out to tech support at Pro Tools, and they still haven't resolved it. And in the old days, tech support would get back to you, 24 to 48 hours max, but usually within 24 hours. I'm hearing from them every 4 to 5 days, if that. So they haven't figured it out. Now, I can tell you what the issue is. It is about plugins, absolutely. But they don't know that. I know that because I've been talking to developers, and I talked to Bob Olson and all these people I know who have been involved for so long, but they couldn't tell me that. And still, after over 2 weeks, because now I'm in my 3rd week with this, they still haven't resolved it and gotten back to me. Now, I'm supposed to talk to them today, so we will see about that. Maybe we can resolve it. Bob Olson said the best way is to just uninstall anything that's not a mainline plugin and deal with it that way. And yeah, I might have to do that. But at the same time, I do need a new computer, so it's only money. But this is very frustrating. And Avid tends to do things willy-nilly. Windows, I know I've been told that they've been trying to include people in the last few years about, developers and whatnot to be prepared. But obviously Avid isn't. And if Windows isn't talking to Avid as much, or isn't talking to the developers who's talking to Avid, who's talking to Windows, who's talking back, it's just a mess. And I know Mac went through the same thing with that last, I don't know if it was the most recent update, but a couple updates ago, and Macs used to be flawless, and then even they hit the ceiling at some point. Come on. We have to work here. The guy at Avid was like, well, how crucial is this to you? I'm like, this is my living. He's like, well, when can I reach you? I'm like, all day. I'm like, this is what I do for a living. And he didn't respond. So I'm really frustrated. I could walk away from Pro Tools. I could. I don't want to. I would still love to record and mix in Pro Tools. I also like doing mastering in Pro Tools personally. But if I have to do it in another program, you know what? I never thought I'd say this, and I never thought it would get to this, but I'm ready. Bring it on. What do you all say? So, by the way, I will get to those other demos pretty soon, I promise. I'm building up my strength, so I should be able to play soon. All right? Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you. Stick around for the giveaways. See ya.